And this month I'm talking about 4 of the pillars of consciousness who brought that truth to the attention of the Western mind over the last 100 years. The teaching itself has surfaced down through the ages and then been suppressed. And now it is back up, and I don't think it'll ever be suppressed again. It's an idea whose time has come. So these 4 pillars of consciousness are the reason that you and I are here today, because they kept this teaching alive despite great obstacles in their path, despite threats to their life sometimes, and in many cases a loss of funding or loss of credibility. But they managed to keep it going, and here we are. So today I want to start by talking about a little man called Phineas Parkhurst Quimby. And what I find fascinating is the fact that many of our people have never heard of him, even though he's considered the father of New Thought. And it's really good to place people like him. When I talk about these historical figures, I like to place them in the context of the time they lived in. You know, what was going on in the world? What were the inventions of the time? So I just brought a few highlights about what was happening in his lifetime from 1802 to 1866. He was born in 1802, and what's fascinating to me is that he was a contemporary of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was born in 1803. So they were alive at the same time, making these great discoveries at the same time. 2 years before his birth, Count Alessandro Volta invented the battery, even though we know the Chinese had done it probably thousands of years before that. The first successful steam engine happened in 1814. The first machine to take a photograph came in 1814. Cement was patented in 1824. The typewriter was invented in 1829, and Louis Braille created a way for the blind to read. Other things that came to be in the mid-1800s were an early refrigerator, bicycles, Morse code, dynamite, the telephone, moving pictures, Coca-Cola, electricity, and the zipper. I've always been grateful for that. Since Quimby dealt with healing physical ailments, I thought it would be important to look at healthcare in those times, and it wasn't really great. Early doctors in America had largely been trained in Europe, but after a while, they started training themselves. And when the European doctors began to rely on science, the newly discovered science about germs and things, the American doctors rejected it. And so they were still practicing bloodletting as a way to cure disease, to rid the body of humors, they called them. Quimby was very outspoken. He really had nothing but disdain for the medical community and religion. And he referred to them as, priests. Everybody in religion was a priest as far as he was concerned. But he was in love with Jesus. And he thought Jesus was teaching the truth. And he became fascinated with what that could mean in his modern world. If we focused only on that and let go of all of the superstition and the dogma that had been attached to religion. So what got him going, and he had a great mind, although he had absolutely no education. I think like 6th grade or something. And he became a clockmaker and a watchmaker, a tradesman. Very short of stature. They called him a peculiar little man. But what got him going was it began with a visit in Maine, where he lived, with a lecturer who was bringing the teachings of Anton Mesmer to America. Was a European and mesmerism was hypnosis that we know today. And so he went to these lectures, and he was instantly fascinated with the possibility of tapping into the subconscious mind. Wow, that was an amazing thing. And it was one of those serendipitous things that happened after that. Once he decided he was going to explore this, and he studied it, he met a young man named Lucius Berkmar. And Lucius Berkmar was a clairvoyant, and he could sort of read people. And so at first, Quimby would use Lucius as a diagnostician, thinking that he needed a clairvoyant. So he would put the patient in a hypnotic state and Lucius as well. And then Lucius would come and say, well, this is what's wrong with them. This is what's going on in their body, and here's the cure. And the cure was usually something like chamomile tea or ride a horse real fast. You know, there's actually a story about Quimby that actually happened to him before he even got into this, that he had something like consumption and tuberculosis, something like that, and he healed himself by getting on a horse and riding it as fast as he could, and he was never sick again. So there was something about him. He was very intuitive. And you know, back in those days when you didn't have a lot of medicine to rely on, you relied on home remedies and you relied on what your body was telling you or what your mind was telling you about your body. So here's what happened, though. That he had, and I'm really simplifying this. This went on for a long time between the two of them. But he had really good results using Lucius in this way. But then he began to realize he didn't need Lucius as an intermediary, which is one of the great cornerstones of all New Thought teaching, is that we do not need intermediaries. We do not need priests or gurus to talk to God for us, right? Or to tap into that field of truth for us. Anyway, he realized, he began to see what Lucius was actually doing was picking up the thought of the patient who knew what was wrong with them innately on the subconscious level. He was picking up what the patient already knew. That's a big thing. Okay, so that was a big turning point. So then Quimby decided he would just do this himself. And what he did was he would sit with the patient and hold their hands and come up with a diagnosis and a remedy. This went on for years and years and years. And he was maligned as a quack. He was vilified. He was run out of town a few times. He traveled around trying to teach this to people. Never let it stop him. For me, that is real love. You know, when you're that committed to the good of humanity and you're that dedicated to pursuing what you think might liberate people from superstition and dogma, that's real love to me. So eventually he realized he didn't even need to be in the physical presence of the patient. And they could contact him by letter. So by this time he was pretty well known. He'd get letters from Australia, from England and France, people asking for healings. You know, it took a long time to get a letter back then, right? And to get it and an answer. So even so, when the patient received the letter, there would be written advice. And he would say something like, when you get this letter, sit down and drink a big glass of water and you will be well. And they were. He discarded hypnosis altogether, and then he would just sit with a person, talk to them, and sense what was the cause of their ills, change their mind, and they got well. That is exactly what our practitioners do. We change minds. We don't heal people. The error is in mind every single time. I get a little excited about this teaching. Well, it's amazing that the world doesn't get this yet, and that I'm just thrilled that you do. So Quimby documented all of his cases. After a while, after years, people said, you've got to write this down. And so he documented about 1,200 cases that were real and had real results. But here's what's interesting to me. His family kept those documents hidden until the 1960s. And they came out as the Quimby manuscripts, which you can read. I often wonder what their thinking was about that. You know, like if they were afraid of retribution or afraid of the government or the medical profession. I don't know. It's hard to say, but they kept it from people until, I guess, the right time. In the 1960s, there was such a resurgence of this kind of thinking with the meditation movement and the human consciousness movement and human potential movement that it seemed to be the right time to start talking again more publicly about the power of mind and what consciousness actually is and what it's a part of. So in a nutshell, here's what he said that he discovered. Mind is cause and mind is cure. Too simple for most people. Holmes said this, that is the greatest discovery since the dawn of human consciousness. And yet, we kind of just play with it. Do we actually take it really personally? I know, I was in this teaching a year or so before I realized they were talking about me. Seriously. It was all theory. It was, oh, how interesting. And then I got it one day, like, oh my gosh, this is about my mind. Now, but the piece that Holmes brought in, we're going to talk about him at the end of the month, that made it more of a heart-centered feeling was that our mind is an individualized expression of the mind. And the mind is a universal intelligence. And now today in quantum physics, they're starting to talk about it as the field of consciousness, the field of awareness, the field of all potential, and that it is conscious and that we interact with it when we think. So Holmes brought in the sense of the presence, that you live and move and have your being because there is this presence of pure awareness that is knowing itself as you. And as you know yourself as it, or the qualities that it embodies, your life begins to demonstrate it. Your life begins to change for the better. So Holmes went on to elaborate how that could be, that humans are an effect of a cause. See, what Quimby said was, mind is cause and mind is cure. But where does this cause come from? We didn't originate it. We are expressing it. So that there is this greater cause, we are an effect of spirit knowing itself as each one of us. And I know that for the human mind, that's hard to accept. Because we know ourselves intimately. We know our personality. We know how we talk inside. And we know the flaws we have and all that. And we think, that can't possibly be true. God is being me. Spirit is being me. I'm an individualization of it. And yet if we can even get a glimmer of that and accept it, our life can change dramatically. You don't even have to know how to describe it. You don't even have to know what to call it. Just there's something that is aware of being me and follows my direction as to how my life should unfold. Doesn't intervene. Remember that little poem I read you that I read to my grandkids? Like, God doesn't intervene. It doesn't do interference. It simply follows the direction of the mind. This is what Quimby discovered. So imagine if everyone in the world knew this. The Dalai Lama said a while back, if we taught every 8-year-old how to meditate in one generation, we would have a changed world. What if everybody knew that the power to create was in them? The power to say what their life will be belongs to us. And it's ours to use. So if you look at the cause of things that are plaguing humanity, you see, in every case, it's attributing the cause of them to something else other than humanity. This whole climate thing is a debate about that very subject. That does humanity have anything to do with what's happening with nature? Well, of course we do. But the other group says, oh no, nature's separate from us. We have nothing to do with that. It's attributing cause to something else other than humanity. And what that does is disempowers us. So, and to make it really personal, every time we blame somebody else for our experience, we have taken our power and given it to them. We have said victim. And even if it's just a fleeting one, it's debilitating over time. And people get depressed, they give up, they get angry because they feel powerless. So this teaching is all about reclaiming our power, not over somebody, but an internal power that allows us to be fully engaged with life without being threatened by it. Remember what the thing that Jesus said, be in the world but not of it? That's really what that means. It means be in the world, be active, participate, be involved, but don't get mired in it. don't think it's causing you to be anything other than the whole self that you are. It's not chipping away at you. Life is not trying to kill you. And to allow ourselves to be fully present and really alive, knowing that how we are is how we experience anything. You know, when we talk about things that are missing, it's because we're not bringing them. You see, here's the truth about love. If it isn't alive in us, it might as well not be real. If it isn't alive in us, it doesn't exist. It's not something that comes to us. It's something we draw out of ourselves, and express, just like we do joy or peace or anything else. So knowing where our experience originates is not the same thing as saying we wanted to be sick or we wanted to be poor or we wanted this or that to happen. It's not conscious. So there's no fault finding in this teaching. And people who don't really understand it and who haven't really investigated often point fingers at us and say, well, you're saying I caused my cancer. No, we're saying consciousness creates form. And there's a field of consciousness about disease. And there's a field of consciousness that promotes stress. And any good doctor will tell you stress will debilitate the body. It will eventually break down in some area of the physical life. So it isn't about wanting to be sick. It's about allowing the mind, or let's say disallowing the mind, to affirm health all the time. Vitality, strength, physical robustness. We should be affirming that all the time. It's the same as wealth. We can't afford, literally, to speak lack. We must speak flow, abundance, supply, energy all the time about this place, about our lives, about our families, constantly affirming the truth. Because our mind is cause and our mind is cure. So, in that field in the field that we all share, it's called race consciousness or collective consciousness. Carl Jung talked about it all the time. There's a belief in illness as a separate entity that attacks people. There's a belief that germs are, out to get us. You know what Emmett Fox, the great metaphysical teacher that founded Unity, said? Germs have just enough sense to come when they're called. And that means when we're susceptible. When people say my resistance was down, well, yeah, that means your truth wasn't up. That's what that means. So sadness can cause lung disease, and so can rage. All kinds of things. There was a study done in the 80s, and a friend of mine who was a doctor told me about this. It showed how often a diagnosis of cancer was preceded by a major life trauma about 18 months before. 18? Yeah, about 18 months before, 2 years, something very traumatic went on. And, how we process traumatic events, how we process stress has everything to do with the condition of our body, everything to do with it. That's why I keep harping on meditation, because it helps the body stay tuned up. It helps the mind stay relaxed. It helps it stay open to possibility. Because this world is yelling at you that it's all wrong, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. They're trying to get us. There's nothing but disease and lack, and the nature's out to get us, and it's constant. It's just belief systems. We're better than that. And that's why these places exist, to keep us current, to help us live. That's love, to help us live a good life, but spread the word. That's what we need to be, spreading the word by example of our life. Very important to care for the condition of our subconscious mind, that field that stores images and ideas. And if we don't have some new energized ideas to take the place of the old ones of limitation and resentments, they will keep producing themselves again and again and again. And that's when we say, oh, I knew this was going to happen. That's when we say, Again, why does this keep happening to me? Well, there's a reason why things keep happening, repeat in our lives. It's because we have an attachment to the idea that causes them. We may not even know it. It's an emotion as well. Now, so people say, well, if I don't know it, what can I do about it? Put some good ones in there. And just like changing the oil in your car, you open that crankcase, it falls out. You put the new oil in, it starts to replace it. It's the same kind of thing. If you have limitation, and I'm speaking of myself too, in our lives, glitches, money glitches, love glitches, relationship glitches, any kind of glitch, there's an attachment to an old idea. How to heal it? Cause a new idea to supplant it. Cause a new idea to be alive in us. And that's where the spiritual warrior comes in, where you insist on thinking something you don't actually believe yet. You insist on talking about yourself. And you know what will happen, though? Your awareness of your innate spiritual DNA will rise up. You see, because we actually do know who we are. And we talk about this all the time, how little kids know who they are. They strut around, they own the world, right? Yeah, look at that. What's that? I don't think I'll eat that. Everything is them. They're very aware of their wholeness and their oneness with all of life. And then we start, learning to appear to be separate in order to live in time-space dimension. But we lose a lot in the transition, especially if religion gets a hold of us and starts telling us that we're sinners or that we're worms of the dust or born in original sin or all that stuff. It's so hurtful to people. But when we start meditating and you start doing spiritual mind treatment, which we learn in class, and we begin to say things that are way above our current condition, it enlivens that old knowing. And pretty soon we start to accept it. We realize it's true. And we start to see the effects in our life. Things begin to change. So it's safe to say the human mind is the most powerful resource we have. It's cause, it's cure to everything on this planet. That's why people like us are cockeyed optimists, because we know it can change in the blink of a thought. We know it can change when enough people believe one wonderful thing together. And that's quantum physics too, when 1% of any group is on the same vibration, the same harmonic, the same energy, the other 99% will jump up, will hop too. And when it's the truth, when it's spiritual truth, it's even more attractive because everybody innately knows this. So as Quimby discovered, there's this field, and that's why he didn't have to be in the physical presence of people when he worked with them. That's why absent prayer works. That's how we can know someone's thinking about us when we're far away from them, right? I know my kids used to call me up and say, "Are you doing that thing you do, Mom? Because I feel it." I say, "Well, yeah, I was kind of doing that thing I do." It's the bond of love between a parent and child. I don't care if you were adopted and never met your birth parents. It's there. There is a bond of love that is never broken. And there's a bond of love between us and our source that is never broken. You can call it God if you want to. It's awaiting us, awaiting for us to do something with it, to do something wonderful. If we stopped arguing about what God is and instead took responsibility for our inner life, we could change the world. And that's what Holmes said, be for something and against nothing. Remember we talked about that? If 1,000 people were for something and against nothing, he said we could change the whole world. He's talking about that 1%. So when you leave here today, or if you go to the bookstore, you'll see a banner that we had created recently. And it's on the wall as you go out. Take a look at it. It says, if you want, to help your center grow, praise, participate, promote. And that's going to be my running theme for this year because it has everything to do with our personal experience of life, not just the center. Think about what you're praising. Now, here's the thing. Okay. God is love and God is law. God is what is, but law is how it reveals itself, right? So Holmes said, love makes the way, love leads the way, and law makes it possible. Okay, so my point here is, what you praise could be negative. As far as the law of mind goes, as far as a principle goes, to put it in that language, whatever your attention's on, it thinks you love, and it'll give you more of it. It's like electricity. It doesn't know what you're going to do with it, right? It just behaves as a principle. That's the way consciousness works. What we praise, we tend to participate in, and we promote, right? So we want to think about, what am I praising? Which means, what am I thinking about most of the time? What's coming out of my mouth? What am I saying with people? Am I praising the possibility, trying to? Let's make a concerted effort and I know we're going to slip up. We all do. I do it. Everybody does. But let's make a real practice of choosing words that are really praising. That are really praising. Instead of finding what's wrong, what's right? What do we love about it? What can we participate in? Because participation is the highest form of service. And we're going to talk about that later in the month. We're going to have a special workshop for anyone who wants to be in service here. So the old saying, look for the good and praise it. Join up and become involved. Tell people about it. You never know, you might save someone's life by bringing them here. I know people who've told me that, oh my God, if I hadn't shown up that Sunday, I don't know, I think I would have killed myself. Happens all the time. You never know. Don't be shy about bringing people with you, or at least saying to them, you know, I found the coolest place to be on Sunday morning. I'd love to have you join me sometime. Spread the word. So Ernest Holmes said about God, this spirit is happy, whole, free, filled with joy, eternal in its existence, and can provide us with everlasting expansion of good. All our highest hopes and dreams have come from it. All our highest hopes and dreams have come from that vast field that we actually are arising from all the time, which means its fulfillment is guaranteed. The echo of its being is in your intellect. The voice of its unspoken word is in your mind. The feeling of its light and life is in your heart. Threefold nature. The emotion of its imagination is in your soul. So we need to realize we have a tiger by the tail here. And the power to make the world a better place for everyone begins right here in our own perception of reality. So I'm going to ask us some tough questions today, which I asked myself this morning while I was getting ready. 1, have I really accepted the truth that my mind has caused in my life, or am I still playing the blame game? 2, if I really believed in this, what would I be thinking right now? 3, what vision would I have for the world? And 4, what would I praise? What would I participate in? And what would I promote? I think we know the answer. I want to read some final words of Phineas Parker's Quimby an hour before he passed. He said, I am more than ever convinced of the truth of my theory. I am perfectly willing for the change myself, but I know you all will feel badly, he's talking about dying, and think I am dead. But I know that I shall be right here with you, just as I have always been. I do not dread the change any more than if I were going on a trip to Philadelphia. His death occurred January 16, 1866, at his residence in Belfast at the age of 64 years, and was the result of too close application to his profession and overwork. A more filling epitaph could not be accorded him than in these words, greater love hath no man than this, that a man or woman lay down their life for their friends. For if ever a man did lay down his life for others, it was Phineas Parker's Quimby. I hope you get to know him better, and I hope you'll take our classes where we really dig deep and get into all of this on a more personal level. All right, let's have a time of, what do we call it, blessing.